In 1964, Dr. Juan Sotos became the first medical professional to describe and then establish the major diagnostic criteria to a highly unusual and very rare condition that he would call cerebral gigantism. Today, Dr. Brad Schaefer, an expert in this uncommon disorder, describes the characteristics first identified by Dr. Sotos in 1964, and now more commonly known as Sotos Syndrome.
The major identifying features of Sotos Syndrome fall into four categories. The first one is changes in their growth pattern. The second one is an advancement in the bone age. The third one is a very typical facial appearance. And the fourth one is differences in their overall developmental patterns. If I can go back on each one of those then and describe a little bit more detail, from the growth pattern standpoint, this is what people would call an overgrowth syndrome, which means that the rate at which these children grow is in excess of what you would expect given a typical pattern, particularly when you compare them to the parental growth. This starts usually in the womb, so that by the time these children are born, they're already what we notice to be relatively large children at birth. And from birth on, they have an accelerated growth rate, so that the pediatrician or the family practice doctor begins to notice that the growth patterns that we expect are being exceeded. The bone age refers to an appearance of the hand on an X-ray that gives us an idea of how mature the bones are. And using just standards that we have, you can see that their bones are maturing at a rate faster than you'd expect given their chronologic age. By far the most identifying feature is the characteristic facial appearance. Children with Sotos syndrome are some of the cutest kids that you're ever going to see. And like many genetic syndromes, those recognizable features, they look a lot like each other, and yet they still maintain their familial characteristics. So it's a very kind of cool combination. But the things that we see in those kind of facial appearances are the head size tends to be generous, as compared to then the lower face, which is a little bit more small and triangular, coming down to this very cool, strong Charlton Heston type chin. And then the overall mid-face tends to be a little bit underdeveloped, so that even things like the palpebral fissures, which are the length of the slits of our eyes, tend to slant downward a little bit as compared to being more horizontal. And then the last thing is that their developmental patterns are characterized by slow acquisition of their milestones, particularly things that are related to what we call muscular hypotonia, just more of the looseness, or some people might use the term floppy baby.
In the nearly 5 decades since the establishment of the major diagnostic criteria, a great deal has been both learned and discovered about the cause of Sotos syndrome. Dr. Trevor Cole, another Sotos syndrome expert, explains these discoveries.
For a while it was unclear what the underlying genetic cause was, and then a number of years ago researchers in Japan identified a subtle change on the number 5 chromosome in a child with Sotos syndrome, and through a series of investigations identified there was a specific gene called NSD1 which accounted for Sotos syndrome. Interestingly, the Japanese group identified that in their population the change of the NSD1 gene is rather atypical from most of the rest of the world, and in most Japanese patients the actual whole gene and an area around the gene is completely missing. We call that a deletion. Whereas in most non-Japanese patients there's actually much more subtle changes within the NSD1 gene itself. So the gene is actually present, but there are various types of spelling mistakes which may be within the gene. And that certainly accounts for probably 70 or 80% of the gene changes at least that we see in the non-Japanese population, and probably slightly higher.
While the discovery of the NSD1 gene error is present in so many with Sotos syndrome, the exact cause of this error is still unknown. However, what is known is the likelihood of this syndrome being passed from a parent with Sotos to a child, as well as the likelihood of the syndrome being passed to other siblings within a family. Genetic counselor Rebecca Anderson describes the genetic transmission.
For a person with classic Sotos, the chance for a child who also has that same gene is 50-50. That person has one normal NSD1 gene and one altered NSD1 gene. And every time that person makes eggs or sperm, one of those two genes will be passed to the child. So it really is a flip of the coin every time. If a sibling has no features of Sotos syndrome, then their chance for a child with Sotos is no greater than that of anybody else in the world. So we would give them the chance that was the same as whatever people are quoting as the incidence of Sotos, somewhere between 1 in 10,000 and 1 in 20,000 births.
The diagnosis of Sotos can often bring with it a tremendous range of emotions. For a parent, these feelings can range from profound despair to incredible relief.
We started when she was 1 month old because we knew that something was different about Holly because she didn't look like her 6 brothers and sisters. And having that many kids and having them look like they're part of the family, and she didn't, made us decide, and our pediatrician said, well, we'll try an endocrinologist, a neurologist, or a geneticist. And by luck of the draw, we started with an endocrinologist and then the neurologist, and didn't get the diagnosis until she was 9 months old from a geneticist who took one look at her and said, she has Sotos syndrome. At that point in time, all of the stress and tension of going through 9 months of doctor visits and test after test and evaluation after evaluation, that's when it all sank in, and I spent 2 weeks of crying nonstop. Never put on makeup. If I did, it came off within minutes, and I cried day in and day out for 2 weeks.
My reaction wasn't very good. I didn't like the idea at all that he might have mental challenges. That, to me, that was one of the worst things that I could deal with. So I had a hard time accepting it for a while.
Well, we learned when he was 4 months old. We actually he was diagnosed, and it was by a neurologist, and he opened up the book to the book of human malformations and showed me that picture, and that's how we were told. And it was devastating.
My son is Zachary, who's 10 years old. He was diagnosed at 25 months old, and when I found out, my first response was relief, because I was following other children with the similar symptoms, and one child had passed away, and I was absolutely scared because I had no idea what was going on with him. So when I got the diagnosis of Sotos syndrome and researched what it meant, I was relieved because I had a child that was going to flourish and had a future.
When Aiden was born, he was my 3rd child, so he was very different to me. He was very floppy, and I kept asking the doctor about him, and the doctor kept saying he was fine, and I didn't feel like he was. So I kept pushing, and finally was told to see a child development doctor. And that doctor suggested that perhaps Aiden had Sotos syndrome, and when I looked it up, it fit like a glove. And then that was at age 2. And then we saw the geneticist, and she said, no, he doesn't have it. She said, come back to see me in a year. And I knew she was wrong. When we came back in a year, she said, you know, I made a mistake. He was so large, I thought he was actually 4. So he fit, in the parameters for his size. And I'm so sorry. He does have Sotos syndrome. And by the way, can I take a picture of him? He's classic.
While much has been learned about the genetic cause and physical signs of Sotos syndrome, very little had been accomplished in helping parents and families cope with the challenges they were currently or soon would be facing.
Back in 1987, there wasn't any information available about Sotos syndrome. About you, was there? And I contacted somebody that was referred to me, and we started it. The first meeting was in Texas in 1987, and from then on, I've had contact with other parents that have been a sounding board, have been given me ideas of medical problems, of how to take care of them, or who to look for help. They've been the ones who say, you have this behavior problem, well, we've got it too, and we've worked on this and it worked. And Holly doesn't have behavior problems now at all, of course, because she's standing right here.
In 1988, the Sotos Syndrome Support Association, or SSSA, was officially organized. Made up of families, physicians, genetic counselors, and healthcare agencies throughout the United States and Canada, its purpose was to provide a social support environment for families and individuals with Sotos, as well as provide crucial information about the syndrome. However, what it really became was a lifeline of support for families dealing with the day-to-day realities of Sotos.
The SSSA provides for its members, I think, primarily a network of support. So there's, other people who are going through similar things that you are, that you can talk to, that you can get advice from, that you can bounce ideas off. I think also it provides you with access to professionals who know a lot about Sotos Syndrome, particularly doctors who specialize in it. I know we've seen a lot of doctors who weren't particularly helpful in a lot of regards, just because it's so rare.
Well, I think one of the important benefits of the SSSA is that it provides a resource for people who are trying to deal with the syndrome, so they have an ability to find out what's going on now, what the expectation for the future is, and the support that the organization brings is also of a great benefit, in addition to the ability to get together in conferences or read newsletters and visit with doctors.
I think another big thing is a sense of universality. We're not alone here. There's other families, there's other children, so we're not just alone with our pediatrician or our general practitioner battling this alone. It's nice to, meet other families and be a community.
As part of its mission to provide a social support environment, the SSSA organizes an annual conference to provide families a unique environment where Sotos Syndrome is ordinary and familiar, a place where families can share common experiences and find loving guidance and direction.
Our first conference was really bittersweet, actually. The first time coming, we were newly diagnosed, so you really didn't know what to expect. And sometimes it was a little bit confronting, and other times, but overall it was the best experience we've ever had. Just the warmth of everyone. I mean, it was just a family reunion.
I think the family reunion is a very good analogy, because you arrive and obviously your Sotos child looks like the both of you combined, but it's like as if there's a third parent that's missing, and you arrive and all the kids all have these similarities and features and things like that. So it's almost like as if it really is a family reunion of sorts. I think that's a very, very good comparison.
As a parent of a child with Sotos, one of the great benefits of coming to the conference for our family is being able to interact with other parents and children who are similarly situated. And also it's a benefit to my Sotos child, because he has a connection. He can make a connection with other children that are just like him. And then our other siblings can make a connection with other children of their age that are part of a family dynamic that involves a special needs child.
The networking that you can get from going to a conference is priceless. Being able to talk to people and just find out who's got children the same age to say, how are you dealing with this right now? You just said you can't put a price on that. And then what I found over the years is I'm the expert up to 10 years old. So I can talk to children, or the parents with children younger, tell them what they should have done, what I wished I had done, what may or may not work for them. And on the same token, I'm looking to the older children to say, okay, what do I have to do to prepare for the teenage years, because they're coming up soon. When you're talking on a typewriter, you don't get the feeling and the emotion in the words, and unfortunately things can be misconstrued. But when you're talking to someone face to face, you can see and explain what you're talking, especially when your child goes screeching by. You can go, see, that's what I mean, and you get that nod of understanding. Yeah, I get it, and this is what I've done, where you can't type that scream running behind you,
It's a family vacation that there is no judgments made. You can go into a restaurant in this hotel, and no matter what your child does, it really is perfectly normal. My child is normal here.
I think it's fun because you get to meet somebody new, or go somewhere neat, or somewhere fun.
I just think they're a really fun and an amazing experience for younger kids and adults like me.
Yeah, if a family was thinking about going to a conference, I would say do it. Do it. Yeah. It's the best thing you can do. It's the best thing you can do for your kids, whether you have just one child with Sotos or whether that child has siblings. And it's the best thing you can do as a family unit. Just being in a place where it doesn't feel that you don't feel so out of place because everyone is like you. It's an unbelievable feeling.
For many parents, the question of what might I expect as my Sotos child grows older is one that can generally be answered with one word: improvement.
Long-term expectations are difficult for physicians because we deal in the uncertainties of biology. And so while there is no one answer that applies to every child, even within the same diagnostic category, knowing the diagnosis does give us some reasonable expectations and predictions. And what I always go over with parents are what these expectations might be. The first one is that this is a difference in the way that the brain organized and developed, and therefore this is not a progressive condition. And so one of the very good news for families is that this is a condition that won't get worse. You may have heard about certain conditions that are associated with neuroregression or neurodegeneration. This does not happen for the child with Sotos syndrome. We expect them to continue to learn, to develop, to continually make progress, and to always have new skills available. The second thing that is very unique about Sotos syndrome is that if you look at children with other developmental conditions, in general, over time, we tend to see performance on certain testing skills and those sort of things seem to get a little bit worse. And that's mainly because as we get older, we're expected to do more difficult things. And so children with conditions like Down syndrome or Williams syndrome or other genetic conditions, over time either stay cognitively the same as you compare them to peers, but not do any really catching up. A very unique feature of Sotos syndrome is that over time, development and cognition seem to get better. So that our early developmental skills, our early developmental testing that people get may suggest that if I extrapolate that out, that the child will finish out at a certain developmental level. And with very few exceptions, almost always children with Sotos syndrome tend to surprise us by exceeding those early predictions.
Like every human being, individuals with Sotos display a wide variety of strengths and weaknesses. While some struggle in one area, another may excel. Where medical problems were once commonplace, vitality and health now exist.
Isabella is 4.5, almost 5, and we got the diagnosis when she was about 2, and she's a phenomenal kid. We just are amazed every day by what she can do. You know, it was hard at first with all the low tone and the delays and everything, but she's fought tooth and nail with her therapist, and she's just doing awesome. She's in a mainstream class right now, going to be starting a private kindergarten class.
I think one of the reasons why she's doing so well is that she had access to therapy at a very early age, early intervention, and then we got involved with Easter Seals, so she had OT, PT, and speech from sort of 6 months of age, and we think she's gone. And she's gone. So I think that's a big part of the reason why she's doing so well, and all the great advice that we've got through the SSA.
Our goals for Zach are to try to make him as independent as possible in the future. My husband and I have talked, and if that means that he still lives with us in his adult years, or we buy a duplex and he lives on one side and we live on the other so we're available, buying the house across the street has been brought up as an option. Or he may go into group living. We really don't know what's going to happen until he's there, because every year he progresses and improves, and we really don't know what it's going to be when he's an adult, but we're doing the best we can to give him the best available choices.
She's always been in they call it a self-contained classroom, so she's always been with other kids with special needs in a small setting, but in a regular school. She was in a regular elementary school and a regular middle school and a regular high school, but in a smaller classroom. Now that she's 19, she's in the transition program in our school and spends part of the day in a house that the district owns working on daily living skills. And then she also works at a retirement community 5 mornings a week for 2 hours a day.
And she takes
loves
some
it.
college classes too.
Right.
They're more physically oriented,
Like
dance class.
aerobics type.
Aerobics,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
My daughter is 18 years of age. She was diagnosed at 3.5 years of age, which is, I guess, late by today's standards, but back then she would be considered probably a milder case of Sotos if by some of the new parents who get diagnosed. They see her today and they think this is what a milder case would be, but it's not necessarily that. I think it was a lot of work and a lot of things. Her baby pictures look exactly like every other little child in the rooms here, and she has turned into a lovely 18-year-old. She may never get the kind of life that I would have hoped for my only daughter, but it's a life, and she's a happy child, and she's a pleasure to be around. Most of the time. Not all of the time, but most of the time.
My daughter is 16, and she's gone through years of having many medical problems and illnesses. And I think that prompted us to get a diagnosis because she was not able to swallow, and she was tube fed for many years. And eventually we found a doctor who knew about Sotos and was able to diagnose her. And if you look at her now, you could not believe it was the same child. And she is thriving and just about ready to stop growing. And she will probably be an independent person who marries, has a family. Her goals are to go to college, to be an ASL interpreter, and I see her able to succeed in that.
While there will be developmental delays that accompany Sotos syndrome, experts agree that early intervention accompanied by realistic expectations can provide beneficial outcomes.
Early intervention continues to be the best tool that we have for helping children with Sotos syndrome attain their maximum potential. The most consistent neurodevelopmental feature that they have is what's called muscular hypotonia, or low muscle tone. Now, it's important that the families understand that tone does not equal strength, and anybody who has a child with Sotos syndrome will tell you they understand the low tone and the kind of looseness and the way the child molds to you. But they will also tell you they recognize very quickly when that child gets upset that there's plenty of strength there. So the muscles aren't weak, but the tone, which is the function of how the brain is talking to the muscles when they're not thinking about it, is lower. The real key to obtaining our early developmental milestones is learning how to trick gravity. That the way that you and I learn to sit and to walk and to crawl and all those things is our brain learns how to stimulate our muscles in very specific sequences that basically allow us to overcome gravity. Children with Sotos syndrome with low muscle tone start at a disadvantage for learning those sequences. And so the critical part is early intervention early, and particularly early intervention targeted at how to treat the hypotonia.
I think early intervention for children with Sotos is important. I think it's important that parents, who are often the most informed in those early stages, bring some of these issues to the doctor's attention. So certainly the children may have some difficulty with coordination and some of their motor skills. It's important perhaps to get a PT involved at that stage, even maybe sort of occupational therapy. Speech is often delayed and rather indistinct, and again speech therapy can help at those stages. I think over and above that, I think it's helpful for parents to be aware of the fact that there are a number of relatively common features which may be important. So for instance, it's not that uncommon for the children to have some middle ear fluid which results in some hearing difficulty. Again, quite treatable, but important to recognise so that you can optimise their hearing. Again, sort of subtle changes in vision which can be corrected quite simply with glasses are not uncommon, but again, recognition of that to give the child the optimal input in those early stages is important.
The most important thing, I think, is to remember that a child develops on his or her own pathway, no matter what that pathway looks like. So I would say the most important thing to do would be to get engaged with your school district and your pediatrician and find out what your child particularly needs, because every child has a different set of strengths and weaknesses. The typical child with Sotos is slow to develop motor skills. Intellectually also typically slower to develop language skills. So instead of fretting about that, the things to do are to find ways that you can help that child, number one, learn what's possible, and number two, not get really frustrated. So a lot of times that means finding an alternate way of communication. It may be sign, it may be pointing to symbols or something like that, but to keep that line of communication open and to keep the child feeling like he or she can make connection with the family, I think is probably one of the most important things early on.
As parents, families, and medical professionals deal with the true realities of Sotos, there is a tremendous amount of counsel and guidance, which, if embraced, can create an environment of positive progress and achievement.
Families will often ask, what can I do? Just tell me, I would be glad to do anything that's for the betterment of my child. And the answer is that by being at the conference, you've probably done 90% of that already. The fact that you're there means that you're interested in your child, you're invested in your child, you will do what it takes to help them. We've already discussed early intervention is a must. In this current environment, it's the thing we know that does the best to help them achieve their maximum potential. Other things that they can do is, more than anything else, is provide the stable home environment. That particularly as I talk to this growing group of kids we have now that are in mid-childhood, early adolescence, and young adulthood, there are specific challenges to having a condition that distinguishes you from other people. And that, as many of us know, even if we don't have Sotos syndrome, if there was something at school that flagged us as different, the one thing that you had to go home to was that stable home environment. And so more than anything else, it sounds so cliche, but I'm a pediatrician, and I love to tell families that the best thing you can do is love your child, support your child, encourage your child, and have a home that they can come home to that's that safe haven that is protection from the chaos that is the world outside them.
Most important thing any parent can do for any child is love them. Sotos kids are no different in that respect from any others. Encourage them, give them good discipline, find the appropriate pathways for that child. And part of that is the child declaring him or herself. But mostly it's to create an environment in which the child feels safe to try things and to work on things and to be rewarded for successes and not be pushed so hard that they feel like they're failing all the time. To be really aware of what the child's readiness is and then present them with a challenge that's just one step forward rather than 20.
I think the most important thing for a parent of a child with Sotos syndrome is, if you put it simply, I think is to remain optimistic but realistic. I think you want the best for your child, you want to be able to help them achieve the things that they're able to, but one does have to have some realism in there. There are going to be things that they are either going to struggle with or are not going to be able to do. So one doesn't want to in any way dampen the enthusiasm that parents have and the enthusiasm they gain from other families, but it is important to have that element of realism so that when you're discussing the issues with the school or your doctors, that you're aware that there are maybe some issues that are not easy to overcome, and you may have to accept that some things don't happen as easily as you'd want.
The Sotos Syndrome Support Association continues to be an oasis of love and support to parents and families coping, managing, and succeeding with this truly rare disorder. You are not alone. We invite you to become a part of our organization and allow us to share this remarkable journey with you.